All right. Welcome to today's episode of the Revenue Lounge. And with us today, we have Stephen Smith. Stephen headed up and founded the RevOps Group, formerly from DailyPay, and has a rich history in RevOps. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role in the RevOps Group?
Sure. I've been in senior RevOps roles for a bunch of years. And recently I founded a company called the RevOps Group, which is a consulting firm really focused on helping companies level up their RevOps organizations and to really also start to understand the impact of AI on those organizations. So I've been in RevOps for a long time. Prior to starting the RevOps Group, I was the leader at DailyPay, which is a really fast-growing fintech focused on earned wage access. I had a team, traditional to most RevOps leaders, that had the sales and marketing tech stack, sales excellence, strategy and operations, the BDR team, marketing ops, channel ops, things like that. And before that, I was an SVP at 8x8 in RevOps, a cloud-based communication company, doing very similar things. I've been a consultant for a long time. I've been an operations leader for a long time. So leading RevOps was just a natural extension of a lot of things I'd done over my entire career.
Awesome. And would you say that RevOps was something you grew up and thought you wanted to do, or was that something that blossomed over the years?
It's a good question. It's something I don't want to say I fell into it because I think it was a natural extension of the things I was doing, Jordan, right? I'd been doing, like I said, analytics, consulting, and building models, and really working with a lot of sales teams and figuring out how sales can, basically better execute on the things that they were doing. And so through a lot of the consulting work I did, I basically started working with sales teams, analytics teams, BDR teams, the marketing organization, and really got a good picture of how that all came together. Plus, I was a CFO for 6 years, so I really understood the importance of revenue in the organization. And
Right.
so it really was something that I evolved into. I wouldn't say early in my career. I mean, look, RevOps wasn't around as a term when I started my career. It's a relatively new term in the organization. Of course, sales ops was, but it's something that I would say I evolved into just through the natural things that I did in a long career.
That's a great point. We were recently working with a senior sales leader and made the point that prior to 2008, CRO didn't exist, and
That's
and
true. Yeah.
quickly went from sales ops and now rev ops. That's a great point.
Yep.
So on that, how would you define revenue operations?
It's funny because you can go out there and you can see a lot of different terms. I mean, the way I think about it, honestly, it's really around maximizing a company's revenue potential, right? By aligning the sales organization, the marketing organization, customer success around the entire customer lifecycle, right? It's around driving, ultimate outcomes, as one of my friends likes to say. And so it's really bringing those teams together to make sure that the entire go-to-market motion is aligned to make sure that the customer is successful and that we can actually successfully deliver value to them. So that's how I think about RevOps, is bringing those internal teams together. And one thing I want to note that a lot of people don't think about, when I think about RevOps, I think about the importance of the finance team as well and them as part of that process, right? So you traditionally don't run a finance organization, but having deep ties into that organization is super critical, right? It's one of the most important
Yeah.
things I think you can do.
Yeah, and this question's off script. On that note, we've noticed a kind of movement where RevOps is maybe getting shifted actually into the finance team, especially at smaller companies. Have you seen much of that, or?
I haven't seen that personally. I mean, I've seen RevOps reporting, most traditionally to a CRO or a chief customer officer. I have talked to a couple organizations lately where they're actually putting it under a president or a COO also. But in the case where I talked to the company with a COO, they also had the finance function reporting up to them as well. So I personally haven't seen it, Jordan, reporting to finance specifically, but I can imagine it's happening. And one of the reasons is I think a lot of the kinds of financial analysts that you would get out of a finance team would do very well on a RevOps team, right? The kind of
Yeah,
analytics they do are
yeah,
very similar, understanding the customer life cycle, understanding customer lifetime values. So the core skill sets would be very similar and very much the same. So I could see that going back and forth. I just personally haven't seen it report up to a CFO yet.
yeah, yeah. And it could just be local here in Seattle.
Yeah.
We've seen these directors of GTM finance get really into analyzing the SQLs, MQL to SQL
hmm
conversion, and really start to get into the weeds of what goes on in RevOps, what goes on in Salesforce. Yeah,
So one of the things that I think, Jordan, is really important is that everyone in an organization really understands, what an MQL is, what an SAL is, what an SQL is, and they measure things the right way. So in the last couple of companies I've been at, I've made sure that the marketing team is measuring it the same way, the finance team is measuring it the same way. So actually having a finance team that really understands that and is deeply engaged in that, to me is super important because look, I want them as a leader, as part of that planning process, I want them to understand it. When we talk about building pipeline and making this stuff happen, right? That they're as deeply understanding of the entire process and what has to happen as anyone in RevOps is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point. And I'm going to transition back into the next question on our list here is on AI. But as you talked about bringing those different teams together, and especially through that finance lens,
Hmm.
as we think about marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, has
Hmm.
has there been one in your experience that's kind of the dominant leading group that defines the overarching mission of a RevOps group, or is there? I guess what I'm asking is, where have you seen the most difficulties bringing marketing ops, sales ops, and CS ops together?
Boy, that's a great question. I'm not sure I would describe it in terms of difficulties. I think what I found in the organizations that I've worked with across the years, including very large tech companies, is there's usually a very strong analytics component in the traditional sales ops, rev ops organization, right? You've typically got some pretty good analytic capabilities there. You've got solid capabilities typically in marketing ops, but they're focused on different kinds of things, right? So that's why, again, getting that common language is really important. Where I don't see as it is common is having, deep analytic capabilities necessarily in the CS organization. So in the last couple of organizations I've worked with, we've actually, I don't want to say lent them our analytic resources, but we've really helped them build those capabilities out and done that stuff. So to me, in bringing it together, it's building that common framework and it's helping them do that. So they're deeply immersed again in making sure that customers realize the value once the customer is, starting to get implemented and on board and realizing those outcomes over time. But again, they don't have the analytic chops, again, just from what I've seen traditionally. So in bringing it together, that's what I would say is one of the most important things to focus on.
Yeah. Okay. That was a great answer. Thank you. That's a great segue into as we talk about AI and RevOps. What's your take on AI helping to enhance the RevOps function?
I am a huge proponent of teams using AI, right? It is going to fundamentally change so many different parts of the RevOps organization, Jordan. So from an analytics standpoint alone, right? So most people use ChatGPT or Claude or Bard or something, and they ask it questions, right? There are some advanced features in ChatGPT. One of them is called Code Interpreter, where you can actually have it help you do very, very detailed analytics, right? You can upload spreadsheets and say, help me identify the trends, or compare this spreadsheet to this spreadsheet, or help me do some hygiene cleaning on some of this data, like some of the tools that are out there, right? So there are many ways that I think AI is going to definitely help improve RevOps organizations. Thinking about like in the BDR organization, for example, it can dramatically help with customer outreach, right? It can help them understand who the customer is, where they are in the buyer's journey. It can help give them some talking points around how our solution can best help them, right? It can help the BDR, can help the sales executive, right? You can actually, through some of like the enablement tools, you can understand what their tone is, how well they're following the script. There's a lot of different ways that that AI is going to get used. On the marketing side, it can help actually create content. So there is, in my view, there's no part of the RevOps teams today that's going to be untouched by AI in the next couple of years. We're just seeing the beginning of how it's going to get used, and it's going to be incredible. It's going to make incredible people very productive.
I agree, and I need to use that analyze scripts and analyze spreadsheets function. That's one I haven't used.
It's really amazing. I started a Substack, and maybe we can include the link at it like at the end of the podcast or in the notes. But I write about strategy and RevOps, and I've written a number of articles about how AI is going to actually impact RevOps organizations. So go check it out. I put examples in there. I actually walk people through how to use some of these tools with live data to show you exactly what it can do. So, like I said, there isn't any part of the sales and marketing tech stack, right? The enablement organizations or the sales excellence organizations or the strategy and analytics organizations that aren't going to be touched by AI, right? It's going to be people using these tools that just drive so much more productivity for the teams. I think it's going to be great. I think we're on the cusp of really re-energizing sales organizations in a super positive way.
I love that outlook. Coming back to RevOps, what are
Yeah.
some of the top areas you've seen AI significantly improve day in the life of RevOps?
Oh, I got a couple of great examples for you. So the first one, like I said, is in analytics, right? So you can start using AI today to do much more advanced analytics. If you want to start doing market segmentation or understanding what the trends are or improving your ICP, right? There are powerful ways to do that today. And I've seen teams start to do that. The one that's been around for a while, but a lot of people have talked about is sales forecasting, right? So there are companies out there like Aviso and Gong and a lot of native capabilities in Salesforce that really allow you to dramatically improve your sales forecasting, right? It understands all the buying signals, all the interactions, all the stuff that's happening in a deal and gives you much better predictability into when that revenue is going to actually come into the organization, if it's going to come in at all. So those are two ways that actually things have started already. Another big area is in sales enablement, right? So we've had call recording tools for a while, right? But for the tools to be able to like sort of watch real time in a Zoom meeting and understand, hey, here's the tone, here's how engaged people are, right? I mean, there are companies out there like Unifor that can actually give you sentiment and like things that are happening in real time in meetings. And so like the whole sales enablement function is actually leveraging all that stuff. These are things that are actually happening today already. Another really big important one is improving hygiene, right? One of the biggest challenges that any organization has is getting sort of having bad data or not having good hygiene on a lot of the data that goes through the system, whether it's through manual processes or a data source that you connected to isn't good, or a salesperson just didn't get the time to get everything in, right? So having tools, and there are AI tools out there, obviously, and like Nektar plays in the space that really helps improve hygiene and make sure it's seamless throughout the system is super, super important, right? That to me, having good data for a RevOps team is absolute. It's like water. You have to have it.
I'm going to steal a term from the gym, but like nice data, what can you do with it? This next wave of AI it seems like it's all about taking action.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to break script and I'm going to
Mhm.
jump down to question number 7.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Are you enjoying the conversation so far? All right. Great.
This is great. I could talk about this stuff all day. First of all, I'm passionate about RevOps. I think it's an incredibly important topic, and a lot of companies don't realize the power that a really good RevOps team can bring, right? And driving the
Yep.
go-to-market mission and actually bringing all these things together and actually making sure that you hit your objectives. And I absolutely love AI. I spend
Yep.
hours every day working with the different tools, thinking about where it's going to go. I've actually been talking to people and doing real-time examples and teaching people like, hey, how does AI can help your organization?
Lovely. I'm going to jump on question number 7, which is
Yeah.
analytics and insights. When we talk about analytics and RevOps, how can AI-powered analytics and insights help businesses identify new revenue opportunities and customer segments? Uh,
I think there's two ways that it can really help on the analytics side, Jordan. So the first way is most companies have an ICP, an ideal customer profile, right? They know what the customer looks like, what industry it's in, the general use case. Using AI, you can get a much better sense as you sell more and more deals and it does more and more digging around who those customers are and who the buyers are, right? It can really give you a much better sense of what the ICP actually looks like and who to go after. So it can really improve your targeting and actually, send you in directions you hadn't thought about before, right? Because you can identify use cases in different industries that maybe you weren't thinking about. So that's one good way that I can go do that.
yep.
Related to that, and I was just talking to a colleague the other day, is many companies do traditional market segmentation, right? So they'll go back and they'll be like, hey, what do the different customer segments look like? What are we doing? So they'll hire a firm. They'll be like, hey, here's the 5 customer segments you have. Here's the different kinds of buyers. And it's a pretty laborious process to go through and to hire a firm to do that and make that happen. Using the analytics capabilities in AI today, right, especially through something called with Code Interpreter, you can actually continually do updated market segmentations and you can actually drill down into new areas and identify new segments without having to go to outside researchers to do it. So as it plugs into your data and understands really, who you're serving, how they're serving those customers, right? You can actually more quickly now identify better segments to go after, better messaging to target them with, and things like that. So I've seen companies doing this today, and it really can have an immediate impact if you use the tools properly.
Uh, that segment, I haven't seen it used that deeply, but I've seen it where,
Yeah.
hey, I need to quickly learn about this industry or this specific thing, and the ability to ask ChatGPT that question.
And literally, and again, as the date of this recording, right, it's one of the paid features, right? It's part of the $20 a month plus, and you can actually turn on something called Code Interpreter. So you can literally upload a spreadsheet and say, you can start by saying, just identify this data for me, and it will actually do an analysis and tell you what that data set looks like, right? Then you can say, okay, tell me what the top trends are that you see, right? And then you can say, and graph them, right? So you can actually upload a spreadsheet. And again, in one of the examples I recorded on the Substack, I actually took a video of a Salesforce extract, uploaded the data, and identified all the fields. It says, here's all the trends I see about SMB and enterprise and win-loss data and what kind of channel, what the source of the data is for the highest win rates, things like that. It can do that automatically. So you can just say, and you can ask the questions in natural language now. So it's not perfect and you have to check a lot of things. But when you think about market segmentation and data analytics, right, that's why I say it's going to really change the game. And so for people that are leveraging these tools today, they can derive a huge impact in their organization.
Oh yeah. I was talking to a couple of weeks back, mentioned right now, whenever they want to look at a different KPI or slice the data a different way, they need to go ask the RevOps team to go do that work. And it takes up to a
Yeah.
week or 2 weeks sometimes. And so now it sounds like what you're saying is with this capability, they could fundamentally ask a tool that would
Yeah.
get you there within a reasonable degree of confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. The key goes back to something we talked about earlier. I think I wrote an article one time called It's the Data Stupid. So having that core data that's accurate is very, very important. And making sure that the finance team and the sales team and the RevOps team, the marketing team are working on the same common data sources and the data sets is really critical. Because what you don't want to have happen, and you see it in a lot of companies, is someone will do an extract. They don't know exactly what right questions to ask when they're getting the stuff out of Salesforce. They pull some wrong fields. They do an analysis, and it gives you really wrong answers, right? So part of the things that to me is really important for a RevOps organization to do is make sure that everyone's working on, I don't want to call it the right data, but like the common data, right, that everyone has and with all the right definitions. And then you can use tools like this to ask any question you want. So you don't have to go to the RevOps team. You can say, hey, look, we've got this database out in Snowflake. It has all the latest sales data. It's got all the latest attainment data, right? So I can find out what does our attainment history look like, right? Is it shrinking? Is it growing? What percent of the reps are hitting their number every quarter, right? Are there certain segments that are doing better than others? And yeah, traditionally you'd have to go to, a RevOps organization or a standardized analytics team and ask that question. And now you don't have to, right? Now you can actually leverage these tools. Now you probably still want to go to those teams to make sure that you're interpreting the data correctly, because a lot of it is an interpretation. And a lot of times the people in the RevOps organization know, hey, let me tell you why the data is like this and not like this. And there's a reason for it. Let me just give you that context. Because in a lot of the cases, context is really important to be able to interpret the answer correctly.
Yeah, I feel like I can't let the title of that blog slide without referencing James Carville. Are you a James Carville
Yep,
fan? Yeah,
I am. And that's kind of why I use the headline, right?
yeah, yeah. I think for any millennials or Gen Z that listen to this podcast, getting familiar with James Carville would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you. That made my week
sure.
actually. The data side makes sense. Are there any other key challenges in implementing AI that RevOps teams have seen that you've
Well,
seen? Yeah.
yeah, look, most teams haven't started like really implementing AI tools on their internal data sets yet, right? So there are companies out there that are starting. I mean, McKinsey is a great example where they've built their own internal AI tools now, based on all the research and presentations and analytics that they've done over time. So they've got a super smart resource internally that they can go ask those questions and say, hey, what do I know about XYZ? Where have we done this kind of work? What insights do you have about this market? Things like that, right? In order to do that internally, right, you got to be able to tag your data, right? And that's one of the big challenges companies are going to have is how do you basically tag and mark your data so that an AI tool can ingest it and then give you smart answers, right? A lot of companies have amazing proprietary data, right, that they would want to use as a competitive advantage, or they want to, for example, take all the customer service questions that's ever been asked, right, and put it in an AI so that they can actually just have smarter answers, right? So there's a process they're going to have to go through to sort of format and tag all that data that most companies aren't prepared to do yet, right? And there's companies out there that'll help you do that. But that today is one of the biggest challenges. It's probably the single biggest challenge that I see. The biggest challenge isn't finding a tool that can do something you want. It's making sure that you can, again, if you want to take advantage of all the data you have as an organization, it's finding a way to tag that and get it in there so it's ingested and in a
Yeah.
usable format so you can actually get the answers.
Yeah, the tagging points are great. Years ago, did research on the impact of tagging and the ROI that would have on enablement tools, forecasts, and that kind of thing. And definitely, this was a big project at a past employer in 2018. We came out with this critical point that things that got used either in the sales enablement program or in the sales engineer, the RevOps program, if they had less than four tags, 80% of that stuff went unused, and there's this sweet spot
Yeah.
of 13 tags.
Yep.
It's like the next step in people don't want to enter data. So as we talk about tags, is this something that still requires human intervention, or is there
Yeah.
a way to automate that?
There are tools to help do it, but actually even figuring out how, the architecture by which you're going to tag content, right? Like call it the tagging nomenclature. There's still a lot of manual process in doing this stuff and actually being able to read through the stuff and figure, okay, here's what this actually really means. Here's why we answer the question this way, or here's why it should get tagged like this. I mean,
Yep.
yes, as you go through and do the initial tagging, right? There are systems now that can watch how you're tagging it and learn and then make recommendations to tag future data, right? So, it's an AI tool learning as it watches you do it. So you don't have to do all your data. And that's the process that people I think are going to have to go through because I don't think, at least I haven't seen it. Maybe it exists and I don't know, but I don't know of any tool today that can just look at sort of raw unstructured data and provide you the tags that you're going to need to make it usable by AI yet.
Hmm.
So there's still a human piece in it and creating that structure, identifying how this is all going to work, how it's going to get ingested, what it means. And then you can train based on how you do those initial ones. You can then train an AI tool to do more and
Yep.
more of it for you automatically.
Awesome. There's one that I might
Yeah.
uh, introduce you to that's up here that does a bunch of work with the DoD on tagging unstructured data.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It's called Coverse, I believe.
Okay.
It's ex-Concur people started this company a couple of years back.
Awesome.
So speaking of tools, what are some of the
Mhm.
most promising AI-driven tools and platforms that you've seen that are available to RevOps professionals?
There's a couple of different ones that are out there, right? So obviously, Nektar is doing some really interesting things with hygiene. I came across a tool the other day called Score, right? It's a no-code AI platform to build predictive models, right? There's another organization out there called GrowBlocks, which is really working on full funnel analytics for a RevOps organization, right? And can monitor your data and provide revenue planning tools. And another really interesting one I came across, and again, I'm focusing more on startups versus big players because look, there are big players out there like Gong and Salesforce and Outreach and Aviso that are doing really cool things. I really like a lot of innovation coming out of startup companies.
Yeah.
So, the last one I'll mention that people, and again, people can use all these companies today. The last one is a little company called Tingono, which is focused on NRR, right, on net retention revenue, and how you identify the customers that may churn on you or which ones are available for upsell and cross sell. So there's a lot of really cool AI innovation happening that RevOps organizations can plug into today. And these tools just get better and better and better the more data that they get from these companies. And
Yep.
so it's just amazing, right? And none of these tools are wildly expensive, right? And a lot of them are willing to work with companies to, again, build their base. So it depends on what problem you're trying to solve, right? There's a lot of things happening in marketing ops and in customer service and things like that. These are just a couple of the ones I've come across, in the last few weeks and had really meaty conversations with people about, okay, how are these tools powerful and how are they valuable to an organization?
Yeah, that's a perfect transition to this next question. It's all about the data. Everybody wants to be data driven, but there's some gaps in terms of data fluency and data
Hmm.
appetite, especially when you start getting into, am I going to trust the data or am I going to make a gut instinct? And I guess this is where this question is going is how can AI complement that kind of human decision making gut instinct element in revenue
Well,
operations? You know, yeah.
yeah, no, it's a great question. The best comment I've seen about this lately is there's been a lot of fear in people that AI is going to replace all these jobs and things like that, and they're going to go away. People want things to do. And that's not the case, and I don't believe that's the case, right? It's people using AI tools are going to basically replace people that aren't using them, right? And so it's having that data fluency and that extra insight from the data is really what's going to matter, right? And 20 years ago, it was, hey, give me your opinion. How's the quarter going to come in, right? What's sales going to look like? What are things going to happen? I think, let's take forecasting as an example, right? Because there are great tools out there today to help you drive better forecasts, right? Literally being able to look at hundreds or thousands of deals and understand what stage they're in and, have you connected to all the right buyers and have you, how many connections have you had with them? How many meetings have you had with them, right? As they gotten through these different steps in the buying process, it's very, very hard, for sales organizations to really look at the breadth of all the deals they have and give you, call it an opinion, right, on like what's going to really happen or not happen. You're much better off taking a data-driven approach for almost any decision you do because it's important to understand. Yeah, another good one is that I came across today is ramp time, right? how long does it take a good account executive to ramp, like in a B2B SaaS company, right? And people will be like, well, it's 3 months or it's 6 months or whatever, right? Look, I would encourage companies go back and actually measure it, right? Because people have an opinion about it, and like that opinion has, it's built into the hiring plans and the ramp times and all these things, right? What I've found when we've looked at it in companies is almost every time the opinion's not accurate, right? It's someone had an idea about it. So look, I'm a huge believer in following what the data says, right? And sometimes you have to make a judgment on that data, like is it good, is it bad, how complete is it? But to me, the age of opinion is gone. Everything that RevOps organizations and marketing ops organizations are now doing, right? It's all based on the data.
I love it. As a former business analyst, you're speaking to my heart on this one. Thank you, Stephen. We're nearing the end here. I have a few
Yeah,
rapid fire questions if you're ready.
yeah.
What's one book that you've loved the most in the most recent past?
So I'm actually going to give you two, if that's okay. One of the best ones I've read recently is Shoe Dog, the story of Nike from Phil Knight, right? It's just an absolutely amazing story of a company that never gave up, right? Against all the odds and against all these bigger players, they had this vision of building this great shoe for athletes. And it's a super engaging read, right? It's just, as someone who loves great business stories, it was amazing because we look at a company like Nike and all you see is like the amazing stores, all the brand deals that they have, but like understanding where they came from and what they went through, it, to me, is a great story of, entrepreneurship and success and things like that. And the second one, and this one is really, really different, is I just read it recently. It's the autobiography of Akira Kurosawa, right? He was a Japanese filmmaker and painter who did 30 films in a career spanning 5 decades. And he's widely regarded as one of the greatest and most influential filmmakers in history. And normally I read a lot of business books and things like that, but it's always interesting to read something called outside your lane to understand what drives people, what gives people passion, like where do they learn from, and then the impact that those people can have, not just on their industry and on their country, but on the world, it can be amazing. So it's just a fascinating story. But those are two books that really stick out that I've gone through recently that I absolutely love and I recommend to people.
Those are both great points. I mean, it's easy to be in tech and be revolutionary and then to read the story of
Yeah,
someone like
I
you.
could turn back here and point to a bunch of books, right? And almost all these are business books. We got Rework, we got The Story of McDonald's, Tribe of Mentors, Crossing the Chasm, things like that, which are like super awesome books. But I also like to read things again that are like just a little bit outside of, hey, I don't necessarily want to learn this concept. I want to hear a good story, right? About how people overcome adversity and things like that, or how they make things happen. So
Yeah.
it's super enlightening and interesting.
Yeah. Now, I think I could be wrong. Is he the director? There's a movie called Seven Samurai. Do you know?
That's his film, right?
Okay.
And it had a huge impact on so many of the directors and the movies that we love today. It was
Yeah.
instrumental. And that's, again, when you, and it's called, it's sort of his autobiography, right? So it's him telling the story of his life. And it's absolutely fascinating, right? And he starts a very simple, humble life, and it's not what you would expect because it was a long time ago in Japan. And obviously things were very different culturally and things were different technologically. And so hearing the evolution of what he went through and learning and doing a keto and just all these things was great.
I love your point of getting outside of kind of your
Your
focus and
box. Yeah.
yep. Yeah. That's awesome. So what's your favorite part of working in RevOps?
I think my favorite part of working on RevOps is actually solving problems that make people successful, right?
Mm.
It's bringing these things together. Because look, at the end of the day, you're trying to drive revenue for your company, right? And make it do it, or make it successful. And it takes a village to do it. It's not just one person. So it's bringing together the marketing organization, the channel organization, the BDR organization, the sales team, all these things, and figuring out, okay, how do we make sure that we can be successful in doing this? Like, again, at the end of the day, it's the customer's outcome that matters, right? And we're on this journey internally to get them there. So solving the problems that make it easier is what I love doing. It's great. Making sure that all of our teams can be successful, to me, is what makes RevOps exciting and fun.
What's your least favorite part?
I think my least favorite part, honestly, is when you solve a problem or put something in place and then people don't use it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we built this for you to make this better or to do this, and they still do something else, right? It's part of just human nature. It's frustrating. It's like, look, I've got 3 different kids, and you can do something, and you'll be like, look, I spent all this time and effort to make this better for you, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter, right? It's like, so it's the same thing in RevOps. If you put something in place that you think is a great solution and nobody uses it, it gets frustrating. And maybe though, then you have to look back and say, was it really the great solution that you thought it was? right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you really have to look at that feedback and be like, maybe there's a reason that they're not using it.
Yep. Yeah. This is one of my favorite tools. I won't mention it. What I realized is it's just easy to use, and
Hmm.
getting people to use it is the hardest part.
Yeah. Think about the tools we use every day now. Change management, and look, I'll give you a perfect example. Like I've been in my career for a long time, and I know that like from a collaboration standpoint, using things like the Google Docs, whether it's Docs or Sheets or the Google Slides is like from a collaboration standpoint, it's great, right? It really is impressive. But I grew up using all the Microsoft apps, right? Excel and Word and PowerPoint.
Yep.
And that's where my brain goes. That's just my natural habitat. So even though I use both platforms, I gravitate toward one and change is hard, right? Change for everybody is hard.
Yep.
And you know how to use certain tools and you know how to do certain things. And even though making a switch might make your life easier in some ways, right? You're like, sometimes you just don't do it.
I won't go too deep into how much better Excel is than Sheets, but
A million times, 100 million times, a billion times. Look, I am an Excel junkie. I'll be
yeah.
perfectly honest. I've even written, actually, one of the articles is actually about Excel, and I love it. And it's fast and it's easy and it's powerful. And they actually just implemented, I don't know if you saw the announcement, they've integrated Python into Excel now, which is
Oh, yeah.
amazing. It's so, look, the innovation that's coming out of Microsoft these days in AI is just incredible. Like what they're doing with Copilot and everything that's happening. I mean, it's going to make people that rely on that do analytics for a living. It's going to make their jobs so much better, right? I'm super super excited at everything that they're doing. It's just incredible.
As someone from Seattle, that makes me happy to hear. I agree. When we talk about RevOps and coming back to the history of RevOps, are there leaders that you look up to personally?
I thought about this question, right? It's a great question because I've worked with leaders at all levels of organizations, right? And I've met some amazing people, right? There's people like Ari Kleonsky, who's an SVP at Five9, right? Who's a great leader for his organization. He's been there for a long time, right? There's people like Kirill Minev, who I work with at DailyPay, who leads all the go-to-market systems, who is an absolutely phenomenal leader. And there are CROs I work with like Steve Seeger at Verint and Scott Sampson, who what makes them great leaders is they've developed deep partnerships with their RevOps leaders, right? And realize that sort of the role of the CRO and the role of like the RevOps leader are so intertwined, right? And so I look at people that are like just like leading by example and showing what you can do. Because like I said, RevOps hasn't been around for that long, sort of as an industry term. And if you try and like dig into the real history of it, I think the first company that had it was Salesforce. I'm not like, there's no exact record of who kind of had the first sort of head of RevOps, right? It's logical that they may have been one of them, right? That's what some of the literature that I've seen says. But finding people that sort of embody that spirit of continual learning and analytics and bringing these teams together and solving these problems, right? And then embracing how you change the go-to-market model are the kind of people that I look up to. So
Okay, I love that answer. Is there advice that you've received that you'd like to share?
one of the best pieces of advice that I got, Jordan, is always try and take a look at it from the customer's point of view, right?
Yeah.
So we're always very focused internally on how do we optimize our internal processes and what do we do and like how do we make it easier for our sales organization or enablement team or like whatever we're trying to do, right? Where many people, myself included, you sort of start internally focused, but at the end of the day, we're trying to make customers successful. We're trying to make sure that they can realize the value from our products and our services, right? And their outcome is really important to them. So making sure when you're designing processes and thinking about things, try and look at it from their point of view, all the touch points they have, all the interactions they have, right? So don't think about how do I make our life as in our company life easier and better, right?
Mhm.
How do we make our customers' lives better, right?
Yep.
So that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got a long time ago. It was from a very seasoned consulting leader who turned into a CEO, and he drilled that into me. We're here to make our customers successful, right? And
Yep.
by doing that, we can often make ourselves successful, but it's the importance is focused on them. And so having that lens, and I try and apply that lens when I think about the solutions we're putting in place or the interactions we're designing again, like in the buying process, right? What is it going to be like for them? Does it make sense given like what their buyer's journey actually looks like from their point of view? Because again, all too often we think about the buyer's journey from like if we're a vendor from our point of view, right? What do our touch points look like with them? Like flip it around, right? So that's the one piece of advice that I got that, again, I've used, through my entire career, and it's incredibly important.
Mm. That customer point of view is so critical. When we talk about value selling and value props and anything around value, the value is what your customers perceive, how you may.
That's exactly what it is, right? And they could be measuring it very differently than the way we think about delivering value to them, right? They may be getting something out of it that we're not seeing or measuring. And so making sure, again, that we're really focused on their successful outcome is super, super important.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, last question is, what's one piece of advice you'd pass on to people who want to follow your career path or start
Yeah,
a consulting company or
that's a good question. The thing I would ask, and again, I've kind of gone back to this too, and it goes back to consulting. It's always ask why, right? Like there's a term out there people use called the five whys, right? Like to really get to the root of a problem, you're gonna have to ask the question why five times. Like, why is this happening? Well, why this? Why that? Like by the time you get to the fifth one, you usually have the answer. So it's always, to me, it's always be curious, right? And it's always be wanting to learn more and figure out like why this is happening, why this is important, right? And for me right now, I have a huge passion around AI and what AI is going to do in RevOps organizations, right? And the question is like, well, why is this going to change? What is it going to do, right? So having that curiosity, I think leads people into more and more successful careers, right? And wanting to know what the answer is. A lot of people, they don't they'll ask the question, they kind of don't really care what the answer is. They just want an answer, right? To
yep.
me, the people that are genuinely curious really want to know, like, well, why is it actually happening, and what does it actually mean, right? So digging into that is the piece of advice I'd give is like never stop wanting to learn, and always ask the question of like, why is this happening?
I love it. Stephen, thank you. This has been great.
You're, you're welcome. I really enjoyed this. It was fantastic.
I did as well. We'll share out the links on
Yeah.
this. I'm gonna stop record here, and I hope you have a
Okay.
great week.
Yeah. Thanks. You too.